Alrighty, so welcome to a new video. Today we are going to show you something a bit different because we are going to look at how cheap we can build a gaming PC, or rather how cheap we can upgrade this one that we had lying around. Beginning with the components, we went for a mix of used and new parts, and we got to about 250 euros. If you went for all used parts, you could go below, or could get everything below 200 as well, I think. First of all, our CPU and motherboard configuration. We went for a Ryzen 5 2600 because they are very cheap. They can be had for around 20 to 30 bucks used. If you go for 3600, you may get about 10% more performance, so that would be also an option, although those are about 40 to 50 bucks. As a motherboard, we went for the B450M-A2 from the Prime series. This has basically the same VRM as the higher up motherboards, such as the Prime B450 Plus or the Tough Gaming even, although the Tough Gaming looks a bit different. It is still the same VRM basically underneath. And so this is a pretty good deal because this is one of the cheapest boards with the AM4 socket that is B450, so you can still overclock your CPU as well as your RAM, and yeah, so that makes it a pretty sweet deal. For the graphics card, there are a lot of options. If you're lucky, you can find a 1660 Super for around 60 to 70, maybe 80 bucks. Or if you cannot, then I would suggest you go for either an RX 570 8GB or 580 8GB. Because the 1060, although it also is an option, a lot of games nowadays are cutting it quite close with 6GB only. So I would recommend you go for the Radeon option. Also with a 1660, you might be 20 to 30% up in performance, so that might also be an option if you can find it for an acceptable price. RAM, we went for 16GB, DDR4 3200. You can get those kits used for like 30 bucks or something, but they only cost like 40 new, so we went for that. That's just a normal G-Skill kit that we also used in our 500 Euro PC. Same goes for the power supply. That's a Be Quiet System Power 10, 450 watts. Here you could also go a bit cheaper, but we went for the safe route. That's also going to be a bit more reliable maybe. And just buy a brand that is actually a name brand, not something weird that is saying it has 600 watts, but it's actually going to only deliver 300, and the other 600 are kind of luck of the draw if you can't pull it from them. So yeah, get something from Be Quiet, EVGA, whatever, some name brand at least. That's at least something that you can judge that the quality is at least somewhat okay, and make sure it has an 80 plus label, and then you could probably say that the quality is decent and it will last. As I said, we went for the 450 watt model, which is capable of handling upgrades up to like a 3060, 4060 even, or a Ryzen 7 5800X for example is no problem. And in the future those components will get cheaper, and then when it comes time to upgrade and when the money is there, you can just plop in those components and they go and have much more power than now. For storage, we only went with a 250GB SSD because we had those laying around, and the old 250GB hard drive. Obviously, somebody that needs more space for games will have to either use a bigger SSD, 1TB or 2TB for example, but for getting you off, for boot, and for just installing some stuff, that might be enough for now. Case-wise, well, we used the old case because we did not have any budget left. That's enough for the components. Now to the gaming performance. And here is where it gets interesting, because obviously this PC isn't going to run every title at 1080p or 1440p at high or ultra details. And yeah, you'll have to turn down a lot of things to medium details and maybe even turn on FSR. And the good thing is FSR is something that makes PCs like this possible. Although we can run lots of games at medium details or even some like Forza Horizon 5 at high details, the frame rates aren't really that good, mostly between 40 and 50 FPS, so you'd have to turn on FSR to get over 60, but that is possible actually. And on some titles you might even have to turn on FSR to get playable frame rates at 1080p. But as I said, 1080p in most cases is not a huge problem. The only title where we encountered any issues was Halo Infinite, where it only ran at like 30 FPS minimum, even with the resolution scaling at its lowest and with low details, and that was kind of not really that playable. So you might have to look into getting really a 1660 or 1660 Super for a better experience. Otherwise, what can you say about this PC? Well, the temperatures are fine, although this case is relatively old and not really very well ventilated, even with the 2 fans we put in. You can overclock this PC about 5% on the CPU, even with this cooler, to 3.8 GHz, and the GPU from the 1286 MHz to 1440 MHz, but that's only going to net you, as I said, a 5% performance improvement or thereabouts, so that's not really that much to go off of. So I wouldn't really recommend it because the power consumption is going to get a lot higher, up to 40, 50, 60 watts even, depending on the load. So this isn't really recommended as far as I'm concerned. Everything else, as I said, is pretty good. Would I recommend it? If you have a bit more money to spend, that would be optimal, because then you could go for the Ryzen 3600, maybe a better cooler and overclock that a bit, and maybe just go for a 1660 or even maybe splurge for a 3060 or something like that, and then you're going to be much happier with the system overall. But nevertheless, you can game on a system like this, which I find pretty amazing. That's all for this video. I wish you a nice day and goodbye.